And welcome, Destiny Christian Church, to Destiny Devos. And so glad to be with you today. And I trust that your year is going well. And we're almost through the winter. We're slowly getting there by the grace of God. But I always tell myself, because I believe it's true, that regardless of the weather, God is still God. And whether the sun shines or it's shorter days, God is still God. And the sun of righteousness always shines, right? So today, I want to talk to you today about the idea that judging others exposes our own hypocrisy. And this is a scripture that Jesus spoke of about judging each other, because it's human nature to do that. I grew up doing it a lot, and even in my young manhood, I was very judgmental of people, and I didn't know where it was coming from. But I think during those times, it was coming from my own sense of maybe insecurity, and plus a little bit of Pharisee in there too. And God has had to, through the years, hone me down like a stone, just getting rid of those ridges and those edges on me that were not healthy for me, because judging others really hurts you in the end. And so here's the scripture in Matthew chapter 7 and verse 1 through 5. He says, "Do not judge so that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you make, you will be judged, and the measure you give will be the measure you get." I mean, this is so plain here. Why do you see the speck in your brother's eye, but don't notice the log in your own eye? Or can you say to your brother or to your neighbor, "Let me take the speck out of your eye while the log is in your own eye"? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. And he's not saying, Jesus isn't saying there that once you take your faults out, you can then focus on people's faults. He's not saying that at all there. I think what he's saying there is that since we always have one fault or another, we're never in a position where we can really judge other people, because we always have a log in our eye, and we're never rid of those logs. So, like Abraham Lincoln once said, he was criticized severely by someone publicly. And so someone came, like an informer, came and said, "Well, so-and-so said this and this about you," and, seeing if they can get a rise out of him. And Abraham Lincoln just said, "He's probably right." And there's something about that totally diffused that criticism. But here's the point, that we all know we have faults. We all know we struggle with things. And when you know that, it helps to temper you from criticizing and judging somebody else. So he says, don't judge so that you won't be judged. And he gives us the reason. He says, for with the judgment you make, and there's another version that says with the measure that you measure, right? With the judgment you make, you will be judged, and the measure you give, you will be the measure you get. And so the rule that you use to judge people is going to come back on you, and you'll be judged. And then he gives an example of why this is so. This is so because you have a beam in your own eye, right? Or he calls it a log in this translation. While you're focusing on the little speck in your neighbor's eye. In other words, we're so oblivious to the extent of our own faults that we almost look to others' faults to distract ourselves from our own faults. And we focus on the speck in our neighbor's eye, and we are blind to our own faults. In fact, the more judgmental we are, the more blind we are to ourselves. And the more gracious we are, the more self-aware we are about our own faults. That's why if you ever read the story of David and Jonathan, when Jonathan confronted David about having adultery with a woman and murdering her husband, at first he kind of set David up and said, there was a guy who had one sheep, he was poor, and his neighbor was a gajillionaire and had a lot of sheep. And the gajillionaire said, "I'm going to have a feast. So I'm going to take that one sheep that guy has and kill it and take it for myself, even though I had millions of sheep." And David was so angry that he said, "The man who did this has to die." And so Nathan uttered the immortal words. He said, "David, You're that man. And immediately David was struck by that beam in his eye, that glaring beam in his eye, because he was focused on the speck in someone else's eye. And this is what Jesus is saying in the scripture, that be self-aware. Now, self-aware doesn't mean that you're always focusing on how you feel and what you think and always down on I'm so rotten. No, that's not what he means. He means that when you think about criticizing somebody else, look at your own faults. And usually that will shut you up quickly. And so he says, how can you say to your neighbor, let me take the speck out of your eye while the log is in yours? Then he calls them hypocrites. And this is why I talked about hypocrisy, that judgmentalism, being judgmental, it just exposes our own hypocrisy, because we do worse, right? He says, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. Usually, if God has a window for us to pick someone's fault and to criticize them, and after we have seen our own faults in our own log, we will be so gentle and so loving, and we'll even come in low and say, you know what, I've done worse than this, man. And so the next time you or I have a criticism against someone, a brother, a sister, or a spouse, always see your own stuff first, and that'll temper how you approach someone. So until next time, check out the website, destinychristianniagara.com, and check out our Facebook and YouTube channels, and look for changes on the website, for calendar changes and things like that, and in sermons and all that. So until next time, good to be with you. God bless you.